Hello and welcome to Speed Tape Mechanic, our first review. We'll be looking at a product here today. Um, just a first kind of disclaimer to explain how this is going to go. Um, kind of to go with the name, I'm a sim racer on a budget. I work a job, do this as a hobby. So that's how we're going to look at reviews, is paid things I've bought. I'm not even going to get involved in endorsements, but things I've bought, do they work? Are they worth it? Kind of viewpoint here. So let's get into it. What we're looking at today is the Derek Spears Design Race King 2. It's a smaller version of the Race King, which I believe the DSD version came out in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. But they made a somewhat less expensive version for years before that. It wasn't quite as nice. You can go on their website, and which will be in the link below, to view. They probably have this box, actually the exact one I have in stock. I have the one, as you can see in the pictures, with orange kind of trim to it, orange buttons and covers. And getting just right down to kind of the why would I need that. As most gamers don't have one, and in fact, I would probably say most sim gamers don't have one. But to me, I got tired of having. I had a G25, G27 at the time, and this was about 2 years ago now. Well, let's see. It was about a year and a half ago, actually, when I bought it, and so I've had it since about August of 2016. And at that time, I had a G27. Was tired of having everything mapped to the wheel or keyboard because that doesn't work for me. Now, at the time, I was using the same monitor that I used for everything else, and my keyboard was in front of me, but I was sitting so far back that it was hard to reach the keyboard. And the buttons on the G27 are honestly just awful. There's 6 of them. They're really close together. They're really tiny, and they don't really move very much, so you can't tell if you're pressing one down half the time. So I wanted something to kind of give me some options in a race and allow me to map everything to where I could reach it in game pretty quickly. Now, I did run into some issues later. I'll get into that in a minute. But that's why I got it, is to basically give me a more realistic and an easier way to map functions in game. I do like running open set races in just about everything. I like being able to dial in brake bias and traction control, roll bars, anything that's adjustable in the car I like to be able to do, because I even though I'm not the fastest guy, I like making the car as fast as I'm comfortable with and then make it very comfortable there. So making those slight adjustments is important to me. Um, Now the cost, it was $135, which in retrospect is a little on the high side for what I got, but we'll get into that. Now, our first glance here is the overall design. Like I said, it does have the carbon fiber faceplate. The buttons kind of are over, and there's four tiny screws that are Allen key. Allen, I want to say they're like a 3 millimeter or close to that, maybe a 2 millimeter Allen key. I will tell you that no, they're 1.5. That's right, because I tried to take them out to do some repair work, and stripped. They're just stripped. They couldn't do anything with them. So we'll get into that too. But the overall design, it's like I said, it's built almost like to go into like a cabin, to go into a dash, and there's not a whole lot really other than that. The front is about it. There's no styling to the back. Obviously, there shouldn't be. So there's not too much. The buttons are there. The trim, you can pick whether you want orange, red. I think they even have black or white trim, and different color buttons for the LSV, like lit up button on the front. And for this model, it just came with the white. I would prefer red or orange or green, anything other than white, really. But I wasn't too picky. I'm still not picky with that. And it does look nice. It does have DSD imprinted on the lit up button. But the dials, there's different types, as you see. There's the 4 safety selectors, safety selector safety switches at the top, of which you have to lift. You want to map something that you're not going to accidentally hit, which I actually do this improperly because I map it to stuff that you don't want to accidentally hit, and I'll map it to where I have the cover up all the time for it, like they would in the real car though, because that's how the real cars work. But anyway, there is 4 of those. There are 8 orange buttons, and those are like buttons that you would find in a real car. They're pretty stiff, got a good feel to them. There are 2 toggle switches that are on the left and right side of the LSV button, the lit up button. And by toggle, they move up and down. And each one is its own separate button. It's not the same function mapped twice. It's 2 separate functions. So you can map one thing to be up and one thing to be down. And then you have the rotary encoders at the bottom. There's 3 of those, and basically one function to the right, one function to the left. You could function 2 different things for each way. We'll get into that in a minute. Now, setting it up, there is some problems. It does not come with its own mounting. It doesn't come with anything really to mount it with. If you want to use Velcro, you got to buy it yourself. If you want to use what they recommend, if you go to their website, they recommend using a RAM mount from, say, Amazon, which is where I got mine from. And although it does work really well, I think that's a little bit ridiculous that there's just nothing to mount it, and there's no cable installed out of the box. So you got to get your own cable. It's like a printer to USB cable. I think they call it USB A or C, or C to A. Anyway, it's your USB for a printer, and you will plug that in the back of it and run that to a USB port. And you have to come up with a way to mount it. I got a RAM mount. I did have it Velcroed. I didn't like it. The buttons are too stiff for Velcro to really hold it in place the way I had it. Maybe if you had the entire back or the bottom, I don't think there is a way to properly do it and still allow the cord to come through, unless you were to actually put it in like a recessed cabin or something. Now, the problem I ran into when I was setting it up is, what do I use this switch for? What do I use that switch for? I didn't really have a prepared plan as to what to map things to. So I ended up, ignition as one of the first safety switch, and then the starter as one of the toggle switches to be up, because that made sense to me. However, it would be kind of nice to have the toggle switch that I use that for to be closer, or maybe next to the safety switches. And I use the second safety switch. I don't think I use the second one. The third one I use for pit road speed limiter in most GT3 cars. I'll use a button on the wheel for Formula cars, but and then the fourth one, I just use that for mute all chat. That way you don't have, if I got somebody screaming or talk when I'm trying to talk or something in a video, I can just hit that, mutes it, and we're good. Now, the question that I ran into is, do I really need to use some of these buttons? I felt like I had to map things, and I ended up mapping everything pretty much. I don't think I used 2 of the buttons, but I do have, like, especially in iRacing, I have pit information mapped to the bottom 4 buttons. So I have, no fuel, only tires, 4 tires in fuel, 2 tires in fuel, stuff like that mapped, as well as the LSV button. It's very light to touch, so I just have it mapped as a clear function for the pits. I probably will change that. I've pretty much kept everything the same since I got the button box, so some of it is still kind of a work in progress, and as I play other games and they have different mappings and I'm having to start fresh, I kind of have seen where I can put different things different places. Now, because I use Track IR, I do have one of the toggle switches. If I push it up, which is the right toggle to push it up is a little bit, you're not going to do that on accident, so I have my recenter mapped to that. I have brake bias and volume controls on the encoders. Now, these encoders, you can't push button them, unfortunately. Now they do carry in the Race King. They do have one that does that, but in this version, they're all just basic encoders, right and left. That's only, and you just map that. Next, we're going to go into like the function. Does everything work? How does it feel? Is it durable? Things like that. Like I said, durability is a big thing here, because if I'm having to buy something with hard-earned cash, I want it to last a good while. I have ran into some products that have not lasted a while. So everything did work as it was supposed to when I bought it. All the encoders, they functioned correctly. It was a little tricky because if you go in the properties in the control panel and look, sometimes it looks like those encoders aren't working. And in fact, in game, it does not pick up every single time you click, especially if you're going really fast, like trying to crank that knob. It doesn't pick it up all the time. It does pick it up as like a joystick, and that might have something to do with it as to how that board is set up. I imagine it's an Arduino board or something of the like on the inside. But it's just a plug and play. Once you got it mounted and set up, you just plug and play, plug it in, it works. You can unplug it, doesn't work, plug it in, works again. No need for drivers, nothing, none of that. So very easy. And it feels good. The safety switches, like I said, when I first bought it, everything worked great. The safety switches worked great when I first got it. Now, after a year and a half, I will say that I ran into some issues. The first of which, and this is probably the more major one because I don't have a workaround for it, some of these safety covers, which I use a lot, like the ignition one, I leave it up all the time in races. So the spring probably gets more wear than the other 3 switches do. Now it has got, I think, weaker, and so if I don't actually snap it closed, if I just slowly push that latch down, it'll actually sit with the button still on and engaged and won't close all the way. I think that's just the spring, though, not a big deal. It's pretty easy to just smack that and it fixes it. Plus it's not something, like I said, those are typically mapped to something you won't use a lot anyway, so there shouldn't be any issue. It doesn't really bother me too bad. The other concern is that after about 6 to 8 months of using it, now after 4 months of using it, I went away from Velcro, went to a RAM mount, hard mounted it, and that requires you to screw in the back of the mount, or the back of the box, into the mount. And when I did that, there are some screw holes that are drilled in already for you to use. And when I had mine screwed in, after a little while, I started running into some issues. First of all, when I mounted it, I realized that the screw hole for the mount was actually pushing in on the board on the inside, which is not a good thing. I wasn't using screws that were too long. It's just that the hole itself, there was no place for the screw to go except into the back of the board. And after some use, one of the encoders actually stopped working properly, and it would pick up each click as the same as the reverse function. So if I clicked it once to the right, it picked it up as once to the right. But if I clicked it twice to the right, it picked it up as once to the right, once to the left, and so forth. So if I clicked it 4 times, it was right, left, right, left. Did not good. Basically made it useless unless I mapped 2 functions to the same thing and made it just basically a button at that point. However, when I built a rig and redid some things, I did take the mount off, and actually I ran into some issues. So I dealt with that a while, and apparently the screw actually pushed the board in, and it required me to finagle the board around on the inside to where I could get the plug back into the USB socket. And there's not really a way to do that. Like I said, I had tried to take the faceplate off to get to everything, and the screws were stripped. I did contact DSD. They said that I could just send it in and get it repaired, but I didn't really want to wait on shipping, and I managed to kind of, like I said, finagle it back in place. Now, I did take the mount off in order to alleviate, stuff in the way while I was working on it. And I decided to just kind of make my own screw holes for the mount in a little bit different location to where it wouldn't be pushing on the back of that board. Ever since then, no problems. The board has stayed in place, and I haven't even been on the inside of it. So I have no idea if that was something for manufacturing, if it just has like some sticky stuff on the inside that holds it in place or what. But I did get that fixed, and it's worked fine ever since. The encoder started working correctly, and I'm able to use it as normal again. Just an issue I ran into, but I don't know if that's a manufacturing problem or on my end, if maybe I just didn't understand what needed to happen for that mount to work properly. I'm going to blame it on manufacturing, but we all know how that goes sometimes. Moving away from the function, we know it works. It is realistic. The buttons and switches, they feel really good. They have really good feedback, positive click for the buttons and the switches. Even the encoders have a really good tight, clicking feel. And the usefulness is definitely through the roof for somebody like myself that doesn't have a wireless keyboard or something of the like to put right there at their desk for functions. And even if you did, it's not quite the same as actually having dials and switches. It makes it so much easier. And not only can you use it for racing games, you can use it in flight sims. You can use it in fact, I use it in some other titles. I'll use buttons for push to talk if I'm using a game with an Xbox controller, because I can just reach over and push the button instead of having to map an Xbox button that I'm going to use to do something else. So, things I would want to change is it should come with a cable. That is definitely should come with that. For the price, $135, I feel like, yeah, it looks good. They do a good job with these, but for that price, it should come with a cable. Mounting, it should definitely come with some sort of double-sided tape or something to stick it to the back of something or to the bottom of a desk or something, because you should be able to plug it in as soon as you get it without having to go to the store and without having to order something from Amazon like a RAM mount to mount it to your desk or your racing rig. So I feel like that's definitely something that they should change. Now, this is more of a minor problem, and it's more of a personal issue, is I feel like there's too many safety switches and not enough toggle switches, or maybe just have regular on-off switches without the safety covers. Because like I said, I don't use one of those safety latches just because I don't have anything to bind to something really that can't be used as that infrequently. Most everything should either be a button or a toggle, really, or on an encoder. Like your setup stuff should be encoder or radio controls, depending on the car I'm driving and what type of racing it is. But 4 safety switches is a bit much. 2 would suffice, and like I said, maybe 2 without the latch. That way it didn't matter if it was up or down. It didn't have an extra thing you had to do to turn it one way or the other. But definitely the latches on the buttons, having 4 is a bit much, especially on this box. Like on other boxes, it might be just for looks, but if you're going for something like this, it really needs to be a good all-rounder, which it is. But moving on from that, it is, aside from switches and stuff like that, the next kind of minor complaint is it's a little bit too confined, too small for labeling. The buttons are too close together. I think this is something that kind of goes across for DSD. As I look at other boxes, the buttons are about the same spread, just bigger or smaller boxes, and so I see that might be like as far as their products, they just might have their stuff together like that. You could label on here, although you would be messing up with the carbon fiber look, which it looks really good, so I'd hate to mess with that. I don't have a need for labeling because I change up what stuff does in each car a little bit, as it's my only button box at this time. And the last big complaint I have is the drilling pattern on the back. It should be where I don't have to worry about putting in a screw and it hitting something. It should be a hole that you drilled and you thought out and you said, this is for mounting, and you can tighten the crap out of it. It's not going to tear anything up. But instead, what I got was where I put my mount in and tightened it up. After a while, it actually loosened up the board. Must have dug into the board and caused a short as one of the encoders stopped working properly. And to me, that's if it's going to come with drill holes in it, they should work without causing any problems. So that's definitely an issue that I see. But again, it's kind of a small complaint, and it was something I was able to fix. Like I said, I just drilled holes myself and mounted it a little bit differently, just as sturdy though, so no big deal. Moving on, we do have just kind of to overview the entire product here. It is what you'd call a consumer grade price. I looked around online for button box materials and stuff like that. Their profit margins aren't incredible, but they do have some. Now, comparing, I did see some DIY button box builds on eBay that were going for about $100 that were either about the same or maybe a little bit fancier as far as the variation of buttons and amount of stuff on them. There's some other companies like BBJ Sim on eBay that have their own stores. I haven't got any of their products, but it looks kind of similar. Some of their stuff does, but I like the bigger encoders that DSD decided to go with here, that Derek Spear has went with. I don't like small encoders. I want them to be pretty big, so I don't have to wonder which one I'm on or anything. I know I've grabbed the big, I've got a knob in my hand. So it's a consumer grade. I guess this is kind of a mid to entry level, really, because it's going to be a little. It looks nice, it looks good, and it works. The price is, right there at the entry level for button boxes. You're not going to be paying $200 to $300 like you would for Real Gear or something like that from Ricmotech, which is something I've started looking at because that's kind of what I'm comparing this to as far as the spacing for labeling and how the buttons feel, how it's laid out. And that's why I have a complaint with it, is because if you look at something like Ricmotech offers, it's a little bit more realistic, a little more spaced out, and the layout's way better for a racing car. So that may be just, really comparing them to the top of the line, but that's kind of what you have to do in this case because there's not too many companies out there. Now, would I recommend it? Absolutely. It's great for an all-around box, or for me, a beginning box, something I needed to just map all kinds of stuff to. But now that I have one, I actually might get rid of this one and go with two other types because I want very specific things on each box. I want a box on the right hand side that's like a dash box, and one on the left hand side that's like an ignition box. And with this box, I have it set up to be on the left side like an ignition box, but it kind of does like I said, just kind of does a little bit of everything. I've got setup stuff, radio controls, ignition switches, pit limiters, and volume. I think I already said volume controls and radio channels and iRacing stuff like that. So yeah, it's kind of an all-rounder for what I have. It's just all-purpose. So I would recommend it for that kind of thing. But if you're looking for like a specific, if you want it to kind of be a little more immersive and more realistic and have a purpose-built type thing, it's definitely not the way to go. It's more of a just kind of a generic. I need a button box. I need a lot of things to be binded for me. I discussed that we are not going to do like a top, a pro con, anything like that. So how I really want to do this is, I've seen like some gamer reviews where it's like buy, rent, wait for sale, etc., etc. That's kind of the way I'm going to approach this. Is should you pay full price? Is it worth the full price? Should you wait for a sale because it's not quite worth full price but worth the sale? And what I'm going to say here is I would buy it at full price if it's what I needed. it's definitely worth it. It does its job. It's lasted me well. It still functions. Yeah, I have had to work on it and work around some things that I didn't necessarily care for. I have some buttons I don't use because the it's the layout's not specific or anything. It's a very generic layout. It's a perfect layout. It looks good. It's stylish and it's functional, but it's not really. It's too close together for a race car. Really, a lot of the switches wouldn't be like that. Um, but absolutely, I would buy it. I would buy it again. That's the big question here. Would I buy it again? Yes. It is exactly what I needed then, and in fact, that's why I didn't send it off to be repaired. Is because I still do. I use it every time I race, and even in games where I'm using an Xbox controller, I still will bind things to that button box because it's there. It's in front of my big screen that I use for most of my gaming now, and I definitely would say that it's worth the full price if it's what you need. Now, if you're not quite sure if it's what you need, um, find one for sale. I have seen, and it's kind of ridiculous. Some people try to sell them used $80. I don't see that, but try to find a used one or try to wait for a sale. Check what they have on sale right now. They do have this one on sale for $135. Me personally, I would pay that again, um, because it does. If for the money, you can't really beat that offer. Now you can go up to 150 and get the Race King, which again it's a little bit bigger, which for me it would be a con because I actually need smaller where I have that box sitting. But if you're looking for something more specific, you're saving another $100 and put it towards a Ricmotech because that's really about the only thing that's going to be more realistic and more spaced out than this. I've checked around and from what I see, that's pretty much it. So that's going to summarize the video for you. Definitely it's worth the money if it's what you need. Now, for somebody that has a button box already and kind of knows what they want, they may not want to look at this. They may want to look at something else, like the Track Boss. I'm looking at that myself because it's a little more specific. It only has 2 of the safety switches and a lot of different buttons and stuff like that. Or the Black Max 2, for instance. I'm not dissing their company. I did say that, as a company, it seems like their buttons are too close together, but that's not always a bad thing. Most of the time, I don't have any trouble finding my buttons while I'm racing or while I'm going down pit road or any of that. So definitely worth the money. Definitely good quality. It is all plastic. I did forget to mention that it is all plastic. There is no metal on it other than parts, but I no problem with that whatsoever because it does its job. Does lend it to flex a bit when you mount it. It does flex just a tiny bit on the mount. You may have seen that when I was recording me flipping the switches and testing things out. Maybe not, because maybe it's just something I feel, because I will feel that it moves a little bit before I actually move it. Again, not a big deal. Definitely good quality. The buttons don't give any problems. Everything that I've ran into, I've been able to work around. So, yeah, that's definitely check it out at DerekSpiritDesign.com and if you're interested. And yeah, of course, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. Especially, if you just like this video, that's fine. Give me a like. If you like more of my videos, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss anything else. I do plan on doing pretty regular reviews of products, but I do want to kind of give a different perspective. Like I said, I've had this for a year and a half now, and I really wanted to put that perspective out there because I've never seen a review on one that was that long term. I've always seen them pretty much brand new. So yeah, be looking forward to more long term reviews like that. I really do plan on, and even new reviews. Sometimes the product you can just tell when you open it, it's not going to change. So look forward to that, and I will see you next time.